What's the strangest, scariest thing you've seen in the middle of the night? I was about 5 and had just moved. I was in my bed, looking up waiting to fall asleep when two eyes peered from the ducking event right at me. I was told it was just my imagination. 10 years later, when we replaced the air conditioning unit, one of the guys found a snake skin shedding in the old air shaft. Damn, you had your own chamber of secrets. A bear's nose pressed against my tent. I politely asked him to go away, and he did. I slept the rest of the night in my car. I live in a ground level studio. My bed is near the window. I reached to turn off the bedside lamp and saw someone in a white hoodie through the gap in the blinds. I went, what the heck, and moved closer to get a better look and hopefully scare the creeper off. The person in the hoodie aggressively moved closer and put his face directly into the blind gap. I jumped back and he ran away. Installed a security camera the next day. This shit is unironically far scarier than paranormal stuff. When I was around 13, I woke up to what sounded like someone knocking on a glass window. I look at the clock and it's around 4 AM. I get out my bed and walk out into the hallway, where I could now tell the knocking was coming from the front door, which had two large glass windows on both sides of it. My dad wasn't home and my mom was asleep, so I decided to check it out. I turned the light on, slowly crept down the stairs just enough to see the front door. The first thing I saw was a bloody mess on the entire window, and on the floor was a man all bloodied up and slowly knocking on the window. I immediately ran upstairs and woke up my mom, who called the police. It ended up being a drunk driver who flipped his car near my house. Holy shit. Finding a bloody man knocking on your door would be ducking terrifying. There was a cigarette butt floating in my toilet bowl. I don't smoke, and I lived alone. When I was 18, I got my first apartment, and I had to be at work by 7 AM and always took a thermos of black coffee with me. I come home from work one day and find coffee creamer in my fridge. I live alone, and I know I didn't buy it. Then I find the toilet seat up in my bathroom. After several times coming home to find the toilet seat up and pleading with the landlord to change my locks, turns out the maintenance man was a drug addict and had been fired, and he had been enjoying my coffee maker while I was at work. Very weird. I've never had an explanation for this, but when I was about 10, I woke up in the middle of the night to what I thought was my dad watching something about trains, which was turned up loud. There were lights and shadows, and again just the sound of like a train coming and going. It wasn't sleep paralysis, I've had that, and I could move. Bright white light, and just a noise. I hid under the covers scared. I asked the next day and nobody was up or heard what I did. Sounds like you missed your chance to ride the Polar Express. About 3 AM on a deserted highway, I drove by what looked like a body wrapped in a white sheet, discarded on the median. I took the next exit, drove back and took that exit, and came back, passed it and parked a little ways up. It still looked like a body wrapped in a sheet. Got out to go look closer when I heard loud rustling in the scrub trees of the median. So jumped in my truck and drove off. Pre-cell phone, so I didn't call police. I looked in the papers, but never saw anything. When I've posted this before, I got chastised about being reckless. I know. Carjackers probably using it to get you to stop so they can ambush. Saw a guy with a shotgun in my house. My brother and I were sleeping in the TV lounge. Woke up and saw a guy with shotgun near the front door. Thought it was a dream, but just in case, I woke my bro up and asked him, who is that? The guy heard us and ran out. We were 7 and 8 years old at the time. Edit full story on demand. It was June. We two brothers onesies just had summer vacations and we were planning a trip to my aunt's house in some other city. We were not rich, but relative to the area we lived in, we were considered quite wealthy. Both of our parents were government officials. At the time, we used to sleep in the same room as our parents because of air conditioner. But this particular day we decided to be rebellious and sleep in the TV lounge while watching the TV. To the right of the TV lounge was the main entrance, and the sofa was placed in such a way that the guy entering would not see if someone was laying on it. We watched a Scooby-Doo movie, and while watching it, we went to sleep. Our parents decided it's probably best to leave us boys there. Now I used to be a light sleeper. As soon as there was even a little sound I would wake up. And around about 1-2 am I heard some sounds and woke up. The sound was from our main gate. I craned my neck to look at the door. When I looked towards the source of the sound I saw a guy standing inside the house. Near the door. He was wearing all black and covered his face with a black cloth so that only his eyes were visible. My first thoughts were WTF is dad doing so late? My father used to lock the doors at night before we went to bed. But then I saw the most important detail. He had a black pump action shotgun in his hands. This guy probably heard me move. He definitely didn't see me, so he just stopped there as a statue. Then my thought was it's a dream because why would there be a guy with a shotgun in our house at night? Right. I woke my bro up and said look at what dad is doing. He got up, looked at the guy, then towards the center of the room. Then he told me dad is sleeping in the middle of the room. At that point we both looked at the guy and said thief. As soon as the guy heard that he bailed out, got out and closed the door. We stayed up for a few more minutes and then got back to sleep. Because we were stupid little kids. The next day however I told my parents what I saw, but they didn't believe me at first saying that it was probably just your imagination. Thankfully I had my bro to back me up. Once he told the same story both the parents freaked out. Next day we had better locks on our doors and a German Shepherd named Jackie, best pet ever. Also RIP. Tips to take from this. Listen to your kids. Tell your kids to tell you immediately if they see something out of the ordinary or if they feel threatened. Why do I read this shit in the middle of the night? My door doesn't even have a lock. My parents were driving us home through a suburban area of Buffalo, New York in the early 1980s. It was late spring I think. The windows of the car were open a little. I heard a woman scream help me. Noon in my family heard it. It happened again. I started crying, but no one else heard it. Still haunts me 40 years later. Something similar happened to me and a few friends in Humboldt County, CA. Car pulls up to us at a park late at night. We were stoners. We hear a help me, I'm being stolen and something else similar a couple times. We drive off and call police, later realizing they were probably trying to rob us. Oh man, I actually had forgotten about this. But my originals bark scared the ever living shit out of me once. As an adult, I left my originals barks plugged in and idling on the home screen and went to sleep. I woke up later to hear ghostly voices mumbling and talking to each other coming from the TV. It sounded just like EVP from those crappy ghost shows where you can hear its voices but not what it's really saying. And to top it all off, over the voices were scary mechanical sound effects and spooky music. I have never, and I mean never, left and barks idling since. The explanation is Microsoft thought it would be neat to use some free astronaut transmissions for their futuristic console, and wanted space music to go with it. Here's a video of what happens if you let those barks idle. You can skip to 9 for creepy sounds and 9:30 for some voices. Link. I was driving to one of my buddies' houses back in high school. The road I would take to get there ran through some dense woods for a few miles and was very dark. On my way there, I saw a man just standing on the side of the road, just staring into the darkness with a blank look on his face. Not walking, staring at nothing. There isn't anything but woods for several miles. On my way back home, at least 4 hours later he was still there, in the same spot, staring at nothing. Maybe not scary, but super weird and creepy. Didn't see it but heard it. 4 years after midnight I would always hear children playing in the distance. Couldn't ever see them, but I could hear them. A couple years back was walking my dog on a late night stroll and I heard it closer than I ever had before. Like right next to me. Looked around and there was about 3 coyotes about 100 foot away from. Apparently they sound like small children. I'm going to preface this with the important detail that all of the garages in the neighborhood that I grew up in were detached from the houses. Until I was about 12. My bedroom was on the ground floor of our house and my parents' room was right across the hall. We had a dog, Aurea, that we adopted when I was 2. When she was about 5 and I was about 7. She went blind. Around that time, she became the world's best watchdog and this is why I believe that It was the middle of winter when I was maybe 9 or 10. And there was snow on the ground. It was a quiet night. Aurea was restless. And we didn't know why. Her hearing seemed to improve immensely since she lost her vision and she would bark at kids playing down the road or the mailman 2 houses down. But it was close to midnight at this point, and the neighborhood was asleep. Aurea wasn't. She barked at our back door and scratched at it like someone was taunting her. Aurea paced from my room to my parents' room to the back door again and again and again. It woke me and my mom up, and my mom finally got up and followed Aurea to the back door and coaxed her back to bed. The following morning, we wake up to some terrifying news. Our neighbors across the street lost their garage in a fire. The empty house for sale behind them completely burned down. The grown-ups around me are throwing around the word arson, and my mom explains to me that someone burned down the empty house. Then our neighbor's garage. The police were following footprints in the snow. They never found who did it. Years later, my mom told me the rest. The footprints weren't lost after my neighbor's house. The footprints continued across the street, past our back door, and right through the narrow walkway between our garage and my room. Then they backtrack to the street and disappear. I don't know if the arsonist would have burnt our house or our garage that night. But either way, Aurea woke us up, and I think they knew that. She passed away last year at 16, and I miss her every day. She was my best friend and she never let anything happen to us. Ever. Woke one night when I was about 5 years old. Was gazing around the room for a bit. I looked at the window and there, staring wide-eyed at me was a man. Hands pressed against the window just staring with his head cocked to the side. Didn't even flinch when I noticed him. I hid under the covers, then peeked out to see if he moved. He was still there. I decided to just stay under the covers. I don't know why I didn't scream. I'm telling you man, trespassers and home intruders are the scariest things. Never mind the paranormal, this is real as day and still horrifying. It was the middle of the night and I crawled to the end of my bed and looked out the second story window in our farmhouse. Maybe 40 feet away and 20 feet up was a light blue, electric looking ball of light about 6 femolit by 6 femolit. It slowly arched from left to right until it went behind my barn. The only thing I can think is it was his bull lightning. Or I was dreaming, but I doubt it. AHH. It's totally bull lightning. You have to listen to the Vox Unexplainable podcast on it. So ducking cool. And there's a few scientists who have been trying to collect accounts on bull lightning for decades, since so little is known about them. I'm sure they would love to hear about your experience. I was about 13 years old and was sound asleep in my bed when something woke me up by touching the pillow my head was resting on. I was startled as it was pitch black in my room and all I could do was feel around with my hands to see what it was. To my relief, it was just my cat. I thought it was weird that she did that because she rarely slept on my bed, and if she did it was by my feet. I left her there and tried to go back to sleep. Then she started meowing. Low grumbly meows. I thought that was odd too because that's the first time I heard her sound like that. I figured she was upset, so I started to pet her to calm her down. Her normally soft and smooth fur felt sticky and matted. She smelled nasty too. The grumpy meowing got louder. I jumped out of my bed and turned the lights on. That was not my cat. It was some random stray that I've never seen before, and I didn't know where it came from. Freaked me out. It was just a cat, but it was very scary at the time. Walking out of Taos Canyon from the hot springs with my buddies around midnight during a new moon. It's about 40 degrees, so pretty chilly, and we hear this mumbling in the dark ahead. As we approach, this scraggly man comes shuffling in bare feet down the trail. He had no flashlight, wearing filthy pinstripe blue pajamas, and talking to himself incoherently. As my friend and I back up to the side of the narrow trail, I asked, "How's it going, man?" "Another beautiful day," he said in a super cheery voice, and went right back to taking to himself. He continued down the trail into darkness. We hauled ass back to the cars, where our other buddy was. She said she had watched him walking off the mess. It was the 80s and my dad bought a 6-foot tall Gumby blow up doll. His plan was to cut the back out, make some eye holes and wear it as a costume. my sister 6, and I 4 shared a bedroom, and one night dad puts on Gumby and walks into the room. Keep in mind this was our first encounter with the doll costume, and my sister and I lost our minds. Strange. Yes. Scary. You better ducking believe it. We moved months later, and the costume came with us. It stayed in our basement, limp, and haunted us for years to come. That back room was full of all sorts of horrors: the pink light, the rolls of carpet, the flickering lamp. But nothing held a candle to the terror that was Gumby. No offense, but WTF was wrong with your dad? One night when we were in the 5th grade, my sister and I were hanging out in my bed with the lights out before we went to sleep in our separate rooms. We would do this sometimes and goof around chat after we were supposed to be asleep. There was a parking lot with street lights about 20 feet from my windows, and it cast quite a bit of light on my wall every night. Never thought anything of it until this night. As we were laying in bed chatting, one of us noticed that the silhouette of a man's head was suddenly prominent against the wall. The best way I can describe the visual is when you see old bits where they have a sheet hanging in front of a light and do silly things with shadows. Except this was just a shadow cast on my wall from a man looking into my bedroom window. Obviously, we were freaked the duck out and both crept into the corner of the bed under the covers. The shadow stayed there for what felt like forever. We eventually tried to calm ourselves down and convinced each other that it was just our stepdad trying to mess with us. So we ran out of the room to see what was up, and there he was, just sitting in the living room. It wasn't him outside. He would have had to run around the house in a split second to make it to the living room. We told him what was happening and he came to the room to see. The shadow was gone. He thought we were trying to prank him with our story before he saw how scared we were. Never figured out who was outside my window that night, but it still freaks me out just to think about it. Actually made me reach for my gun. My dog was standing on my bed growling into barks at something, and I saw it move, hit the light, and it was his reflection in my TV. What a ducking dope. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates, one male, one female. Me and the other girl slept in the same room because we are both girls, and the guy had the other room. One night I couldn't sleep. The door opened and the guy came sneaking in. He then lifted the blanket of my friend's bed and jerked off onto her feet, wiped it off and walked away. I was too scared to say anything while it happened, but I told her the next day and we moved out that same day. A few weeks ago, my older cousin was sitting on the toilet with the lights off, so she didn't wake anyone up. So I have to go pee and I walk into the bathroom and she was tired, so she sounded like some ghost girl and it scared the heck out of me. My cat screams at night, and not just any type of scream. Like she sounds like a human baby when she screams. Anyway, the night this happened, it was also during a power outage, so the lights were flickering, and my sister is freaking out. We go and find the cat looking possessed and trying to attack us. Weird because normally she is very affectionate towards us.